Good morning. My name is Larry Cotton. I serve on the Church Services Committee. Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist in Canton. We are a welcoming and caring and diverse faith community that seeks to nurture and inspire each person's spiritual journey while we serve others in our commitment to peace and justice. Reverend Richard Trudeau. He has graced our pulpit as recently as last February. Reverend Trudeau was the minister of the UU Church in Weymouth, Mass. For 17 years, and for 35 years he was a teacher of math and the history of astronomy at Stonehill College in Easton. He is the author of Universalism 101, an introduction for leaders of UU congregations, and the just-released Bible Stories for Skeptics. And now let us enter into the spirit of worship with our introit.
We pause this morning from the chaos of the world to reclaim the beauty within these walls that carries us through our week. By our gathering, we bless this place.
In shelter, we know ourselves blessed.
Can we join, please, in hymn number 1? May nothing evil cross this door. Could we please be joined in a spirit of prayer or meditation? Dear God, you seem to be a laissez-faire kind of God. I've never noticed you suspending the laws of nature or intervening, at least in an obvious way, into human affairs. I've never known you to incinerate anyone with a bolt of lightning. You seem to favor the non-directive approach. You don't say anything. You let us figure things out on our own. Talking to you reminds me of talking to a therapist I used to see. She never said anything either. Sometimes I wondered if she was paying attention. Sometimes I wondered if she was still in the room. But it didn't matter. I talked to her anyway, and it helped. God, when I talk to you, I find myself slowing up, calming down, taking stock, tuning in. Even though I don't think you're anything like what most people seem to imagine, it feels good to talk to you. When I talk to you, I feel I can talk turkey, get down to brass tacks, be honest. I don't have to hide anything. And when I talk to you, I feel that I'm catching sight of what's important. When I talk to you, I remember things. I remember the principles I believe I should live by and what will make me proud of myself. I remember why I'm lovable and why I'm not, and what I need to work on and what I regret. I remember who matters most to me and whom I miss and why I hurt. And I remember my goals, where I plan to be at this point in my life and where I am instead, and how I feel about the difference. God, when I talk to you, I feel I'm getting in touch with who I am. When I talk to you, I feel oriented, grounded, and aware. I feel heard. Thanks for listening. Amen. My sermon later is called Thinking About God. The reading and the commentary is about the fact that, according to the Bible, we're not supposed to think about God. This is the second commandment, or at least as I understand the second commandment. In the King James Version, with a little revision, a little modernization, the second commandment says, "You shall not make for yourself any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the sky above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth." It's the commandment saying we're not supposed to make images of God. I say it's the second commandment. That's if you're a Protestant. Jews, Catholics, and Protestants number the commandments differently. I hope you at least recognize it as one of the commandments. It's Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. "You shall not make for yourself any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the sky above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth." You might wonder, what's this about the water under the earth? These people thought the earth was flat, and the sky was a dome above the flat earth, and above the sky was water, and below the flat earth was more water. And the ancient Israelite people obeyed this in their temple in Jerusalem, in the place in which in every other temple in the Middle East there was a statue of the national god. In the temple of Jerusalem there was an empty space. They said Yahweh, their God, is there. But there was no representation of Yahweh. There was just an empty space. And they gave Yahweh an unpronounceable name. We're not actually sure the name is pronounced Yahweh because there's an uncertainty about the vowels, in part because pious Jews didn't even try to pronounce the name, but when they saw it in the scriptures said Adonai, which means Lord, which is why in English there's this, among English Jews and Christians, there's this custom of calling God the Lord. It's because they didn't want to say God's name. I think the wisdom behind this commandment is more extensive than a commandment not to make statues. I think it means we're not supposed to make images of God at all, even in our minds. If you imagine God as an old man as I was brought up to think of God, it's wrong, excuse me, according to this commandment. It's wrong. That's an image of God. We're not supposed to make images. And though it would be tempting to imagine God as a female to make up for centuries of patriarchy and male chauvinism, that's wrong too. That's wrong too. And it's wrong to think of God as like the Force in Star Wars. I think the meaning of the commandment is it's wrong to imagine God at all, to conceive of God. The commandment is saying God is totally different than everything in the sky, everything on the earth, everything beneath the earth. We're not supposed to imagine God or even conceive of God. God is beyond our comprehension. I think that's the meaning of the commandment. Of course, I have trouble with it because I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and I have trouble with authority, and I don't like to be told to do anything. I don't like to be commanded. And in this connection, I'd like to tell you about what strikes me as an alternate version of the second commandment. There's a now deceased minister named A.J. Mattill Jr., whom I knew slightly. He was the minister of Liberty Universalist Church in southern Mississippi. It was a rural church just outside the town of Louisville. And I have no idea what AJ, the A and the J stand for. Like a lot of Southerners, he just went by initials, A.J. Mattill. One time I said to him, A.J., what do you mean by God? And he said, God is my heart's name for the mystery of the universe. God is my heart's name for the mystery of the universe. And I like that. I thought to myself, oh, there's a God that exists. There's a God that exists. There is a mystery to the universe. There is a mystery to the universe. We're born into a world we didn't create. It's very big. It's very old. We won't be here long. We want to make every moment count. And we want answers. We say, why am I here? What's the meaning of life? What's it all about? There is a mysteriousness to the universe. And A.J. Mattill is saying he uses God as a name for that, a name for the mystery. A.J. Mattill's understanding of God is something like the x of an equation, if you ever studied algebra. In algebra, there's a number you want to find out, and you call it x. And you write down what you know about x, and you hope to infer what x is. But there are some equations that you can't solve. There are some equations that no human can solve. God is like the x of life's equation. I think that's what A.J. Mattill is saying. Not the x experienced just abstractly or intellectually the way a mathematician might, or a theologian even, but the unknown aspect of life as we experience it emotionally. He said, God is my heart's name for the mystery of the universe. I think this notion of God as my heart's name for the mystery of the universe honors the second commandment. It's saying basically the same thing, that God is beyond our comprehension, and yet it speaks to a modern mind, or at least to my mind, a little better than the original second commandment. And now, for the support of this religious community and its work, the morning offering will be gratefully received and I hope freely given. Even though, according to the Bible, I'm not supposed to think about God, I do anyway. I sin against the second commandment all the time. I'd like to share with you two ways in which I do think about God, depending on my mood. And at least on the surface, they seem to contradict each other, but I'll argue at the end they really don't. Sometimes I'm in a kind of cosmic mood. I look out at the sky at night, at the blackness and the stars, and I'm awed and puzzled and afraid because I'm weak and finite. And when I'm in this kind of cosmic mood, I think about God as nature. The ancient people who wrote the oldest parts of the Bible were ignorant, right? They thought the earth was flat. They were ignorant. They were ignorant of lots of things that we know. But they weren't stupid. That's not the same thing. They weren't stupid. And when they spoke of God, that represented something that was very real to them. And I, therefore, feel that since they weren't stupid, this thing that was very real to them is probably very real to us too. But we call it by a different name. In their language, ancient Hebrew, there's no word for nature. You can't say nature. I think they said God instead. Not all the time, but most of the time when they speak of God, I think they mean what we would mean if we said nature. And I'd like to point out that nature has a lot of the qualities that are traditionally attributed to God. Nature, as far as we know, has no end. It just goes on forever. And it's everywhere present. Everywhere. If our understanding of nature is correct, the laws of nature that are operating in this room right now are the same as the laws of nature that would be operating at the bottom of a deep well on a planet 1 billion light years from here. Nature is everywhere. And nature is all powerful. It's all powerful. It would be a stretch to call it omniscient, but nature does contain the answers to some of our questions. When I say I think of God as nature, I don't mean nature apprehended just with the intellect, the way a scientist might, but with my emotions and intuition, too, the way a naturalist would, the way Thoreau did, for example. I'm now going to go off on a tangent about Hinduism, which will just last a couple of minutes, and then I'll come back. In Hinduism, there are thousands of gods. The one of them that's most like the God of Judaism and Christianity is called Brahman. This is the biggest, most abstract God, Brahman. And Hindus believe, or in Hinduism, there's this belief that we're part of Brahman, and Brahman is part of us. But most of us don't realize it. And that's part of why we're unhappy. We don't realize that we're part of Brahman and Brahman is part of us. And so in Hinduism, there's this very elaborate culture of meditation. The idea is if you meditate well enough, long enough, deeply enough, you'll realize that you're part of Brahman and Brahman is part of you. And you'll be less unhappy. Your fear will be reduced. Your fear of being weak will be reduced because you'll realize you're part of something tremendously powerful. And your fear of your upcoming death will reduce because you'll realize you're part of something that goes on forever, something endless. End of tangent. We can make use of this insight if we think of God as nature. Back when people talked about nature, let's say 200 years ago, nature was separate from a human being. When Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote his essay, Nature, nature meant everything other than him. But there have been some scientific discoveries since Emerson said that. Beginning in 1859, we have the two books by Darwin that tell us that we're descended from pond scum, right? I'm descended from the simplest life forms on the earth. The atoms in my body all come from the earth. The earth is part of me. I'm part of the earth. And then in 1957, a paper was published I'm sorry, I can't remember, a physics journal. I think it's called Reviews of Physics. A physics journal published an article called Synthesis of the Elements in Stars. This was in 1957. There were 4 authors. The lead author was Margaret Burbidge. And the second author was her husband, whose name I don't remember, so we'll say Mr. Burbidge. and then the third author was William Fowler, and the fourth author was Fred Hoyle, whose name you may have heard of. He was a famous astronomer. Synthesis of the Elements in Stars. And in this paper, they announced the theory that has since become gospel among scientists, that the atoms that exist, the atoms in my body, the atoms in the earth, the atoms in the universe, were for the most part created in stars. That at the very beginning, there were hydrogen atoms, but all the other atoms were cooked inside of stars or were formed when stars exploded at the end of their lives. So all the atoms in the earth, all the atoms in my body, all of the atoms come from stars, come from far away, long ago. We're literally made of stardust. Literally, it's not a metaphor. It's true. We're made of stardust. And that means those two scientific discoveries together, Darwin's and then the one of the Burbidges, mean I am as much a part of nature as a wave is part of the ocean. Think of a wave in the middle of the ocean. You can mentally isolate it from the ocean, but it really isn't isolated. It's part of the ocean, and the ocean is part of it. We are as much a part of nature as a wave is part of the ocean. And if you think of God as nature, if you think of nature as the ultimate reality, as the mystery of the universe, or the answer to the mystery of the universe, we can get the same kind of consolation that the Hindus could get, but we don't have to become Hindus and we don't have to meditate. We just have to realize that we're part of nature. We're part of something tremendously powerful, so we don't have to be quite as upset at our own weakness, and we're a part of something endless, so we don't have to be quite as upset at our own finiteness. So this is one way I think about God. Sometimes I'm in a completely different mood, not a cosmic mood, a much more personal mood, often having to do with some moral decision I have to make. I won't be here long. I want to do what's right. I don't want to screw up. I don't want to waste my life. And then I think of God as love. This is the New Testament concept. It's in the first letter of John at the end of the New Testament. The passage is, "No one has ever seen God. But if we love one another, God lives in us. God is love. And those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them." That's the first letter of John, chapter 4. God is love. That slogan, which of course is used by lots of different Christian groups, was the slogan that was adopted by the Universalists as their personal motto. They painted it on the front of pulpits, they carved it into chancel tables, they stitched it into samplers, they put it on the mastheads of their newsletters. God is love. That was the central Universalist intuition. And that's the second way I think of God. A.J. Mattil had said, God is my heart's name for the mystery of the universe. In other words, God is a name for the answer to this question. What's it all about? God is a name for the answer to that question. What's it all about? Well, if God is love, if you accept that from the Universalists, then we're being told that love is what it's all about. Love is what it's all about. We won't be here long. We don't have time to completely understand the universe or life or much of anything. Not completely. The experience of love may be the closest we'll ever come to knowing what it's all about. And when I say the experience of love, I don't mean just the experience of loving another, but the experience of being loved, of accepting the love of others for us. This may be the closest we'll ever come to knowing what it's all about. I think of God this way when I have a difficult decision to make. If I have a difficult decision today with a moral dimension, I find that almost always I don't have enough information. I don't have enough information. But thinking of God as love gives me a basis for making a moral decision. I ask myself about any given alternative, will this foster loving relationships? Will this foster loving relationships? If the answer is yes, I go with it. I say, well, that's the right choice then. Or if I'm trying to decide on a religious path to follow or a spiritual path, I ask, what path will foster loving relationships? That's the way to go. That passage in the New Testament said, no one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. You might say, come on, Richard. Nature and love are different. How can you think of God in these two ways? Well, I think of, to return to another part of Hinduism for a minute, I think of a Hindu story you may have heard about blind men and the elephant. Are you familiar with this? There's some blind men who are encountering an elephant for the first time. They've never heard of elephants. No one's ever described elephants to them. They're gathering around this animal that they've known nothing about. They have no prior knowledge, and they're reporting what they experience. One is stroking the trunk and reporting to others what he experiences, and one has hold of the tail and is reporting to the others what he experiences, and one has his arms around one of the legs and is reporting what he experiences, and one has hold of one of the ears and is reporting what he experiences, and one is grasping the end of one of the tusks and is reporting his experience to the others. And their reports are completely contradictory. But there's one reality. There's one reality. And if the wisdom behind the second commandment is right, there's this one reality, and if it manifests to us in different ways, that's okay. That's okay. Could we join, please, in hymn number 348, Guide My Feet? may ours be a religion that like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual works of love. Amen.